Hello everybody and welcome back. It is Michael from Hallowed Thrills back with another video, and today, with the haunt season now officially over, it is time to do our yearly Halloween Horror Nights wrap-up video. Now before we get into the wrap-up video where we're going to break down everything from this year's event as far as my ranking lists for the zones and the houses, as well as the house of the year and zone of the year, I just want to make sure that you guys are subscribed and have the bell notifications turned on to get notified whenever I post a video. And also, while you're down there, please make sure you go down in the description and follow both my Instagram and my Twitter. And also, if you have not entered the giveaway from last week's video, make sure you go and do that as well, because I'm giving away an amazing HHN prize pack. Got a bunch of stuff over here. Make sure you go do that. Now, without further ado, let's head in to the video. So we are going to start out the HHN wrap-up video with talking about the zone of the year. So this is the zone of the year. This is what was the community's thought as the best zone for this year's event. So the zone of the year was Lights, Camera, Haction, Eddie's Revenge. This is the one that was in the Hollywood section of the park, and this was a fantastic zone. There's no other way around it. This was a great zone. It was the anniversary best of scare zone and included Eddie in it. It was a good zone. Now the house of the year, which once again this was like what was thought as the community's favorite house of the year, and that was Wicked Growth, Realm of the Pumpkin. So neither of those are a big surprise, because once again the community 100% on board saying that those two were the best. But now we are going to go and talk about my house count for this year. So I went to the event a total of 6 nights. So I went the opening weekend for 2 nights, and then when I was on my vacation in October, I went for 4 nights of the event. So out of my 6 nights at the event, I went through a total of 70 house run-throughs. And you can see my total breakdown of my house run-throughs. My most being Icons at 14 run-throughs, and my least being Tooth Fairy at 4, which was tied with a few other houses, but Tooth Fairy at 4. And like I said, a total of 70 house run-throughs over 6 nights, which is not bad, honestly. For only going the amount of times that I did, 70 house run-throughs is better than most. Now, let's head into my breakdown of my top 5 zones for this year. So we're going to start off at number 5. Number 5 should not be a real big surprise, as it was the least hyped zone out of all of them. That being 30 Years, 30 Fears. It didn't live up to expectations. It didn't really bring much to the table that wasn't already there for the event. It just kind of set the scene, and that was about it. So there wasn't much to it. So that's why it goes at number 5. Number 4, I have Gorewood Forest. Now, Gorewood Forest, I had at number 3 for the longest time, but after I thought about it more and more, I was just like, for opening week, it was really good. And then when I came back in October, it just seemed really empty. I don't know if they got rid of a lot of scare actors in that zone or what, but it just seemed like a really dead zone whenever I went through it. There was always like 0 scare actors other than the Terror Queen. So it was just kind of disappointing, honestly. Now, number 3. This one is a lot of people's favorite, but to me, I hyped it up more in my mind than it actually ended up being, and that is Seek and Destroy. I was on the hype train of Seek and Destroy when the event started. I was super excited for it. The thought of what it could possibly be, because we didn't really know much about it. But unfortunately, in the end, for me, I didn't really like it. I mean, I liked the characters in it. I liked that they added the victims halfway through the run, which made the story of it at least a little bit more known. And I absolutely loved the actual controller being up on the screen and you being able to submit to the controller. That was a really cool touch, but in general, it just wasn't my favorite New York zone. Number 2, though. Number 2, this was the surprise of the event for me. This zone was the biggest surprise of the event. and I absolutely loved every character in this zone. I had great interactions with all of them, had great pictures of all of them. The people that were the characters that were in this zone and the people that brought them to life absolutely killed it every single night of the event. Number 2 is Crypt TV. Absolutely loved it. I don't know how much else I can say about it. The suit, Miss Anity, Walter, the Looksee, every single one of them killed it. The Birch, the Mordeo, like, oh, every single person in that zone absolutely killed it. And I wish I could have gone through that zone more. Of course, that only leaves one left at number 1, my favorite zone, and of course goes with the theme of the zone of the year, Lights, Camera, Action, Eddie's Revenge. I loved this zone. I could sit in that zone all night. I practically did a couple nights where I just sat in there for a little bit. That zone was amazing. The scare, it had the zone with the most scare actors. I mean, at least it looked like to me. Maybe it was just because it wasn't as spread out as New York, but it looked like it had so many scare actors. I loved the stage sets. The actors that were on those stages absolutely killed it as far as interactions. Eddie was there. Eddie was amazing. I loved the chainsaw hordes that were in there. And just being able to pick out the different characters from the different zones from previous years was just it was so cool to see all of that. And the character other than Eddie that was the best that was the best in that zone was the Vamp 55 Ice Cream Man. That man deserves a round of applause. They killed it. They killed it every single night that I was there and just made that zone 1,000 times better. So that wraps up our top 5 zones for HHN 30. Now we're going to head into the top 10 houses. We're going to start off with number 10. Now, I've said this time and time again. I rode this house into the sunset of HHN Light. I absolutely loved this house at HHN Light, but as far as it living up to the hype heading into HHN 30 and it pretty much continuing its leverage into HHN 30, it just did not do that. It fell flat for me. So number 10 is Revenge of the Tooth Fairy. Sorry fairies, I loved you last year, but this year you didn't bring the same energy for me this year, and it was kind of disappointing. Speaking of disappointing, we also have number 9. So number 9 and number 10, I kind of went back and forth for which one I liked less, but I decided that number 10 being Tooth Fairy and number 9 being Beetlejuice. I loved Beetlejuice as far as the movie goes. The house was good. The scare actors in it were fantastic, but it kind of felt empty at a lot of times. There were a lot of empty boo holes. There were a lot of empty sections where it was just static figures once again, and it just didn't feel as a complete house as I hoped it would be. And now we're going to move on to number 8, which there is a massive gap. Let me just say this. There is a massive gap between number 9 and number 8 as far as quality goes, because I just want to make sure that you guys know that, because it was hard to figure out 8 through 6, but 9 and 10 definitely set in stone where they were. But these next 3 were so much better than those 2. Number 8, I have Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This house was so good. I had the 4 times I went through it, I had great run-throughs. It just kind of suffered with the whole getting people through it. The 4 times I went through, I got stopped so many times with a conga line of just people just stopping dead in the middle of the house, which kind of killed the flow of the house for me. So I didn't have that many great run-throughs as far as that. I did get a lot of scares in it, but it just kind of killed the vibe of the house because I wasn't moving through it at a good pace. Now moving on to number 7. Number 7, which was a surprise for me. I enjoyed this house a lot more than last year. Bride of Frankenstein Lives. Now, this house, they added stuff, they took stuff out, they made it a better house, they added more scare actors. This is what I thought should have happened to Tooth Fairy. They upped this house 1,000 times more than it was at HHN Light and made it seem fresh, seem new compared to what we saw last year, which is why I still enjoyed it. compared to at HHN Light. Number 6, moving right on to that, we have Welcome to Scary Horrors in the Heartland. I loved Scary. I had it super low on my list to begin with, but as the event went on, I went through it more and more times because the Springfield Stay and Scream took you right in there first. So I got a ton of run-throughs of it, which made me love it even more. And going through the Unmasking the Horror tour and getting to go through it, it slowly kept climbing up my list. And the scare actors in it killed it every single time I went through it. Cindy, I loved my interactions with you the entire event when I was there. HR Blood and Guts killed it. Meaty Meats, Sam Meats, just all of the characters and scare actors that were in this house were amazing. Now we have a little bit of a bigger gap, but not as big as the previous gap, to head on to number 5. Number 5 was my big surprise of the year. I had this higher on my list after opening weekend, but it started to drop further and further down because I didn't have as many good run-throughs on my second trip down. That being Haunting of Hill House. Don't get me wrong, this house was great. After opening weekend, I had it at number 2, but it dropped down to number 5 because the other run-throughs when I was down there weren't as good. But the theming of it was great. I didn't have to know the story to understand what was going on. The tall man, I loved the fact that he got taller as the house went on. And then the ghost in the zombie in the basement, or ghost in the basement, scared me every single time I went through it. And having them crawl on the floor was really, really scary. I loved this house. And the dark hallway built off of the dark hallway from Graveyard Games and just made it 1,000 times better by adding a scare in it. Absolutely loved the house. Number 4, we have Puppet Theater Captive Audience. This was a tough one between 4 and 3. I battled back and forth between them for the longest time, but I just could not see myself putting this any higher just because of the other 3 being as good as they were. So Puppet Theater is at number 4. The scares in this house were great. All of the characters were in it were amazing. Avion, I loved seeing you in the house every single time that I went through it. You absolutely killed it this year. The rest of your scare actors that were scare actor friends that were in there absolutely killed it this year. That tent house pushed the limits of what I thought a tent house could be, and I'm excited that now that they've seen what they can do with it, I'm excited to see how they build on it for further years. But now we are moving on to number 3. Number 3 was a very good house to me. I loved this house. The wait times were always super low for it, which is why I enjoyed it so much, because I was able to just get a ton of run-throughs of it. And I enjoyed every single run-through I had of it, because I loved seeing my main man, Boris Schuster, which is why number 3 is Case Files Unearthed Legendary Truth. This was a private eye detective noir deep in the black and white streets of New York, kind of a spin-off of Slaughter Cinema. So it really hit that mark for me. I loved this house. I loved private eye detectives. I loved Slaughter Cinema. I loved how each room's audio fed into the next one to make you look and see which case you were going into next. I loved how it was like the whole storybooks of Boris Schuster and his different cases that he went through. I just loved the whole entire idea of this house and what they did with it, and it built on that Slaughter Cinema idea. It was a great sequel to that house. I loved it. But now we have, once again, a slight gap, because 1 and 2 were neck and neck every single night of the event. Every single time I went through it, I was always like, wow, that was a great run through. And then the next house I would go through, I'd be like, wow, that was a much better run through. I just could not figure out which one I liked more, but in the end I decided on putting it this way. So at number 2 we have HHN Icons Captured. I loved this house. I quoted every single scare that I got in that house every time I went through it. The caretaker was my favorite icon going through this house. I know the director has my heart, man. I love the director, Paolo Ravinsky, Paolo Ravioli. Absolutely love you, man. But The caretaker stole the show for me this year in this house. And he was by far my favorite as far as interactions that I had, especially when he was on the throne. Absolutely loved this house. And I'm so sad that I'm not going to be able to go through it. But I do hope that we do see the icons in the future and that this isn't the last that we see of them. Now that moves on to number 1, which, of course, if you haven't guessed it already, number 1 for my top 10 list is Wicked Growth, Realm of the Pumpkin. Once again, this deserved to be the house of the year. This house was everything that it was supposed to be. It lived up to the hype. It exceeded the hype. It was great. The facade, amazing. The pumpkins, amazing. The scares, amazing. The overall story of the house, amazing. The characters, amazing. The fact that the interactions that I could get with them while they still stayed in character, amazing. I hope that we see these characters again. I hope we see some sort of sequel to this house. I hope the Pumpkin Lord comes back next year as an icon of the event and we get him spreading his vines all over the park, because that would be amazing. He was truly Halloween, as he would say. But that is going to wrap up our HHN wrap-up for HHN 30. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, please make sure you drop a like and also comment down below your hype list, your top 10s, your top 5s, whatever they may be from this year's event. I would like to know what you guys think and how your lists compare to mine, because personally, this was a very great year. There were some houses that were better than others, but as far as the middle of the lineup goes, they were neck and neck all event for me. And until next time, I've been Michael, this has been Hell Thrills, and I'll see you guys next time.